Our guest, Julia, thank you. I want to thank Sonia as well for giving me the opportunity to do this. Every now and then I get the opportunity to come and speak with you guys, and I love doing it. It's a privilege, it's an honor. I think Reverend Sonia is an amazing pastor, and if she's watching, Sonia, we love you. We appreciate you. And if you're not watching, why not? You know? Thanks, Keith. Keith's good for the soul, you know. So I know that Sonia preached a sermon on forgiveness not terribly long ago when she was going through the Eric Butterworth book. And I know that Nick touched on forgiveness last week with his very encouraging word about fatherhood, which I appreciate. How about Nick from last week? I asked him, where's the jacket and tie? He's like, I'm not preaching. It's back to shorts and short sleeve shirt. Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Nick, for last week. For those of us who are dads, we appreciate an encouraging word because, as parents, anybody who has kids know you're going to mess it up. You're going to need forgiveness. You're going to need a lot of grace. And all we can do, I had a pastor mentor tell me this one time, all you can do is love your kids as best you can. That's it. And so we do that, and some of our crap just spills on them, and we just can't help it, So we pay for them to go to therapy, and we keep trying to do better. But I'm going to pick up on this forgiveness theme, and in order to do that, I'm going to start with a passage from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 18. Where Peter's having a conversation with Jesus. Some of you, if you were raised in a Christian church, you may know this, although it may sound a little different. I'm using Eugene Peterson's translation, The Message again. But in chapter 18, verse 21, it says, "At that point, Peter got up the nerve to ask, 'Master, how many times do I forgive a brother or sister who hurts me? 7?' Jesus replied, 7? Hardly. Try 70 times 7. So there you have it, folks, 490 times, but that 491st, forget it. Clearly, that's not what Jesus is getting at, right? He is promoting this idea of abundant forgiveness that flows out of an abundant heart. And I do want to get into this theme, but I want to offer a word of encouragement first. I'm going to beg you to not tune me out this morning, if that's okay. Some of you have ADHD and you're going to tune me out anyway. It's okay. I'm a therapist, you can come talk to me about it. But the reason I say this is I know forgiveness is a common theme in churches, as it should be, but sometimes it seems like, I think I've made the mistake talking with people of kind of skipping over the actual hurt to get to the part about the moral imperative that forgiveness is the right thing to do. Like you should do this because God forgives you, and you should. In therapy, we call that shoulding all over yourself. I should do this. Yeah. So I'm going to try to make this not be one of those where it's, forgive. Don't want to do that. I don't want that to be the energy of the sermon this morning, because I know that in a room, really a room with, I was going to say a room this size, but a room with one person, you're going to find trauma, right? There was this old movie, it's called They Live, directed by John Carpenter. You know that one? Not one of his better films, let's be honest. John Carpenter is the man that brought us the first Halloween movie, which I'm a kind of a horror movie buff. My favorite horror movie, Halloween. They Live, not so great. But the theme in They Live, there's this premise where there's these kind of skull-faced aliens that have taken over Earth, but they look human. They look just like us. And the only way you can see them is if you have a special pair of goggles. If you get the goggles on, you start to see this skull face. And that's the coolest part of the movie. Other than that, it's pretty lame. But I wonder, what if there were trauma goggles and you were in a room this size? I mean, could we even stand it if we got into everybody's story? I mean, nobody gets through this thing unscathed. And I know it's not equal. I have clients where I have to tell them, you really have had more than your share. And I know some people that have had more than their share, but nobody gets out of this thing without some bumps and bruises. So this theme of forgiveness, I want to talk about it, but I also want to acknowledge the depth of pain that we've experienced being human beings here. And sometimes we go through hard things. Sometimes clients may ask me, or friends may ask you, or you may ask yourself, why did this happen? Why did I have to go through this? And I may not be wise about all things, but I'm wise enough not to try to answer that question. I tell people I don't know why. I don't know why. And I try to comfort them, and I say, but I do believe, I don't know if this is much comfort, but if it is, I want you to take it with you, that God can do something beautiful with this. Amen. So there is something redemptive and beautiful that can happen through your pain. At the very least, you may meet somebody who's gone exactly through what you've gone through. Amen. And you can say, yeah, I understand that. I've experienced this in my practice as a therapist. I'll have a teacher come in, and I used to be a teacher, and they're talking about how hard it is. And I can say, yes, yeah, that does suck. Yes, 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 classroom management is horrible. Yes, I was really bad at classroom management. Turns out being their buddy is not a great idea, guys. Because you cut them loose, you can never rein them back in. Better to start tough but I learned that the hard way. So, cannot answer why these things happen, but do we believe in a redemptive God and a God who makes things beautiful? Yes, we do. So that's what we affirm this morning. So no finger wagging, no judging, you should forgive, no shoulds. As well-meaning people, we sometimes tell people, well, you got to forgive. Let's pause, because people are suffering. And yes, would it be helpful if people forgave? Yes, but they have to do it in their own time. God is a shepherd. Somebody once taught me, God's a shepherd, like our passage from earlier. He's not a rancher. He shepherds, he doesn't herd. And the movements of the Spirit are gentle. Sometimes they take a while. So I really want to talk about kind of a little bit about what forgiveness is, how it works, what its benefits are, if that's okay. So I'm going to pick up on Nick's definition. This is similar to what you said last week. I got this from the Mayo Clinic, but it really reminds me of what you said, Nick. The Mayo Clinic, the famous clinic, defines forgiveness as an intentional decision to let go of resentment and thoughts of revenge. Isn't that nice? An intentional decision to let go of resentment and thoughts of revenge. So notice, there's no minimizing of pain there. Forgiveness is never saying, oh, it actually didn't hurt. It's never that. You can fully own how badly you've been hurt, and at the same time make an intentional decision to let go of resentment and thoughts of revenge. It also, notice it doesn't say, and therefore you must reconcile and hang out with the person who hurt you. Yeah. Well, some people are like that. I thought you forgave me. Well, yes, but you're not stealing money from me again, or you're not going to assault me again, and you're not going to do this or that to me again. Yes. Doesn't mean you're not forgiving. It just means that sometimes reconciliation doesn't accompany that. Those are two separate things. Sometimes they're correlated and sometimes they're not. And so in Scripture, we are commanded, there's verses like what we read here from Jesus, or forgive as Christ forgave you, or there's this general ethical idea or moral imperative that it's a good thing to forgive. But I want us to kind of look at why. These things that are, it's better to look at moral teachings from the lens of how do they benefit us? Like, why does this work? How is this helpful? How is this an expression of love? And so that's what I want us to talk about. So from the outset, as far as benefits, I think I want to say that forgiveness frees us from the effects of bitterness. And when I think of bitterness, and I think we've all experienced it, and we certainly know people who've experienced bitterness. Sometimes we know people who are kind of locked in a bitterness that goes on for years or decades. And you can see, if you spent time with someone like that, it's a cautionary tale, isn't it? because you see that at some point it's like the oxygen got cut off, and you're kind of locked in a story that is so malnourishing that by the end there's I mean, the person's still there, but who they could be, it's just a shadow of who they could be, because they're living in what I would call a fear-based story. There's a whole brand of therapy called narrative therapy, and basically we're framing our life and our situations in stories. I think it's very helpful, because whether you're aware of it or not, you're telling yourself a story. We tell ourselves a story when we come here every Sunday. I told a story during the meditation, the story being that you're important. Now, when I say story, it doesn't mean it's a true story, but it's a story, right? And you can choose what story you live in. If you're holding on to bitterness, what's happening is you're holding on and living inside of a story that doesn't serve you. Amen. I'm not saying you cannot camp out there for a little bit, but don't stay there. Everybody's entitled to feel what they need to feel. But if you notice that you're staying in that and you feel stuck in that, then it's time to figure out, how do I get unstuck from this? Eckhart Tolle talks about how we kind of exist on two levels. This gets tricky. You know, have you noticed whenever you talk about spiritual things, like the words can only get you so far, and then it's like, okay. Richard Rohr says all language is metaphor. Nothing actually captures the reality. Nothing actually includes it, it just points to it. So I'm going to try to do that with this Eckhart Tolle teaching, which is we exist on two levels. The level of kind of the spacious kingdom of God level, our deepest self, the deep I, and then this form, like this person you know as Matt, for example, in this form, walks around and does stuff, who's a therapist, or Keith, who's a musician and does things. Like, there's this form, and then there's that deeper us that's anchored in what we might call the spirit realm or the kingdom of God. And I think the goal of our spiritual life as we walk on this earth right now is to bring that deeper I into the day-to-day of this form. Wow. Does that make sense? Yes. And so if that's what we're trying to do, then holding on to things, holding on to injuries with bitterness becomes a hindrance to that, because then you become lost in thought. You're up here all the time, and then you forget, and how easily we forget who we are. Yes. How many times a day do we forget, unless you're really blessed, how many times a day do we forget who we are? That I'm important, that I'm valuable, that I'm worthy of love and respect, that I'm in union with God. So we don't want to forget that. We want to keep things free up here so we can live in that story. Dr. Maya Angelou, who is a Unity, one of our probably most famous Unity members, she was part of a film project called Poetic Justice. It's an older movie, had Janet Jackson, it was a John Singleton movie, and it was with Janet Jackson and Tupac Shakur. And so Maya Angelou wrote the poetry that Janet Jackson's character, who was a poet in the movie, and she had a cameo in the movie, I believe. So on set, she saw Tupac Shakur was in a heated argument with somebody, using a lot of profanity. She had no idea who he was. I mean, he's a very famous, rap artist. And she said, "I don't know Tupac from Six Pack." She's like, "I just don't." all she saw was a young man who was hurting. And she said, "May I speak with you?" She said, "May I speak with you?" And he was, he was cussing and didn't want to hear it. And she goes, "I understand, but may I speak with you?" And she got him to calm down. She took him aside and spoke to him. And she said, "When's the last time someone told you how important you are?" And one black artist to another, she said, "Our ancestors stood on auction blocks and were bought and sold so that you could stay alive today." And he went from angry and full of rage, and he began to weep. And she walked him back to the set so he could resume working on the movie. What a wonderful illustration of living in that spacious story versus living in that claustrophobic bitterness story. Her energy was able to free him of that, if only for that moment or that day. But how beautiful. Some of you may know or remember that Pope John Paul II there was an assassination attempt on him in 1981. And what you may or may not know is from his hospital room, he publicly expressed forgiveness for his would-be assassin. He conveyed forgiveness and love to him. And then several months later, he visited him in prison. And he gifted him a rosary, and then they began a relationship that lasted for many years. Eventually, he lobbied and campaigned for this man to be pardoned. And after serving many years, he did get pardoned for that act. And in 2014, he visited the tomb of John Paul II, and he left flowers there. I love that story. I think it's powerful on a couple of different... First of all, just to see one person love another person well kind of takes your breath away. But there's also this thing about what I was getting at earlier, like reconciliation is not always part of it. It was in this case. Well, I don't know if I'd call it reconcile. They weren't friends before, but they had a relationship that built after. But notice the man still had to experience consequences for his actions. And sometimes in our lives, the consequences, you don't get to be around me because you hurt me. That's okay. It's okay. You're not being mean. You're not being unforgiving if you need to protect yourself. That's fine. But how was John Paul II, how was the Pope able to activate that kind of love and forgiveness in his life? That's what I want us to talk about in the remainder of our time, like how to kind of make that work. You could say, well, he was the Pope. The head of the Catholic Church. He better be able to forgive. But really, we spend a lot of time talking about how important it is to forgive, and I have clients that ask me how. I don't even know what to tell them sometimes, because it's not like you can't make yourself forgive somebody. How about that? Yeah, you cannot. So free yourself from that. I don't have to work it up. You cannot make yourself forgive somebody. That's like if you've ever had, when you were a kid, your parents made you apologize to your sibling. Yeah, you apologize, but it's. But is it not the most passive aggressive thing you've ever? Sorry, you may as well stick your middle finger up while you're saying it, right? So that's the same as like you can't make yourself forgive. So let's just release that. You don't have to work it up. We don't need it done by 8 o'clock tonight. It's okay. I want you to be very gentle and compassionate with yourself. God is a shepherd, and you have that shepherd spirit in you. Peaceful, calm, it's okay. Be very gentle and compassionate with yourself. And if you find that you don't want to forgive, if that's where you are, I actually think that's okay. And what I want you to do is I want you to accept that. I accept that right now I don't want to forgive. And then I encourage you, be open if possible. Or even just say, I'd like to be open to that because I know it's good for me. But if that's where you are right now, okay. Accept where you are. I'm just giving you some pointers of what I think could help us get there. I don't have a formula. Accept what has happened to you. It's so hard sometimes that, this is what happened, and this is how someone treated me. Sometimes we get locked into that story. If I could go back. If I could just go back and relive that, the choices I would make. And what happens is you're lost in thought again. We have this human tendency to replay the past or worry about the future. So the past is here. We don't live here. The future's here. We don't live here. The present is here. This is where we live. So accept what's happened to you and accept your feelings about it. This was very hurtful to me, and I accept that I'm very angry, or I accept that I'm hurt. Acceptance is so important because when we don't accept what is, that creates anxiety in our lives. I think AA, they have the expression, live life on life's terms. I think that's an AA thing. Whatever it is, it's great. And acceptance is a way of living life on life's terms. Another just piece of advice that I would offer, if you feel like you've been hurt or traumatized and you've not asked for help, ask for help. I tell clients that I think the most important life skill ever is asking for help. We're designed for community. Book of Genesis, it's not good for humanity to be alone. We're wired to be together. You have gifts that I don't have. We need each other. Ask for help. Ask for help from friends. Ask for help from a therapist if you need to do that. I'm a therapist, so I think everybody needs it. I'm biased that way. But if you are noticing that you have trauma and it's still residing in a very large portion of your brain, actually some good therapy can shrink that at least, or reduce the shadow that it casts, and may open the door to you forgiving. It may free up enough space to where you're able to move forward with that. I also encourage you, when you think of people who have hurt you, to try to remember this is not an excuse, this is more just helping you understand. People behave according to their level of consciousness, okay? I stole that from Eckhart. You know all good sermons are plagiarized anyway, right? Just collections of cool things we've learned. So, people behave according to their level of consciousness. Remember that. It doesn't excuse what they did, but you can kind of just know this is their level of functioning. This is where they are. And it may be deeply broken, but that's where they are. And you don't have to live at that level of consciousness. In fact, you're probably at a, dare I say, a higher level if you're even thinking these kind of thoughts. But that can help you control the energy you bring to the story if you accept that they are behaving according to their level of consciousness. Then I would say this: I don't want you to try to work up forgiveness, but I do, if you feel ready, we believe in affirmative prayer here at Unity, where we state, often what we're doing is stating the reality of that deeper self of the kingdom, and we're bringing it into the current situation. And you can do that with this forgiveness thing. Set an intention that I'm making a decision to let go of resentment or any thoughts of getting even. Say it. This is one of the kind of manifestation things you'll hear from spiritual teachers is say it like it's already true. Yeah, say it like it's true. And then let yourself feel it. Like take a moment, sit with it for a few minutes. What would it feel like if I actually released this? Jesus taught, when you pray, believe that you have it. Perhaps this is the reality he was suggesting. Gary's saying yes. That is what he's saying. Thank you, Gary. Yes. Yeah. So affirm it. State it like it's true in the present tense, like this is your current reality. And let's see what Spirit does. Let's see what God does. This can all get better. Right? Yes. Set an intention and leave the rest to God, to your shepherd, to that loving source. Richard Rohr says you cannot not live in the presence of God. You cannot not be in the presence of God. And finally, a great place to start is with yourself. When I worked some of you know I was a minister before. I worked at the church for 4 years. Then I was unemployed. And it's the first time that I'm aware of that I was clinically depressed. I didn't know it. And I went to a therapist. I was unemployed for several months. It was a tough time. Gordon Suddeth was his name. He's passed on now. He's made his transition. I called to get a therapist the first time I'd ever done it. I wasn't in this career yet. The lady who answered the phone, she was going to set me up with some guy, but I'd heard the guy's name before, and I'd heard kind of a iffy review about him. I said, you got anybody else? She said, well, we have Gordon. She said, he's wonderful. She said, he used to be a pastor. And I was just out of the minute. I said, yeah, let me see that guy. Let me talk to him. And he taught me about, Jesus talks about, he's asked, What's the greatest commandment? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second's like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And Gordon taught me to focus on the as yourself part. He said, Jesus assumes that you love yourself. Clearly, it stuck with me. I'd never heard that kind of teaching before. You know, some of our religious traditions, we just think our brokenness and sin is the whole story, and that's all we talk about. We don't talk about original blessing. We don't talk about dignity. We don't talk about being made in God's image. Amen. And all that that means. Amen. So I exhort you, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And there's a good chance in a room this size that, well, probably we're all holding some things against ourselves. Wouldn't it be great to start to let that go? Free up some space up here so the life of God can flow more fully? Let's do that. Let's set an intention, let's affirm it, and may God make it so.